Today, my friends, me talking about two of the characters I know a lot of you guys are looking forward to in Final Fantasy Brave Exvius when they land on the global side of FFBE. We're going to be talking about the Advent Children version of Final Fantasy VII's own Cloud Strife, and then the Final Fantasy VIII character, Squall Leonhardt. We're going to be going over the similarities of these characters as well as their differences in everything of how the character functions as a character, what they can do, what they can't do, and as well as the differences in the gear that they're going to be needing for you to have on your account to make the most of them. We're going to give a couple sample builds with these characters, one maxed out build for each, and then one, very basic in the most sense of the word build. So let's go over the similarities first. Both these characters, as you may know by now, are big limit burst damage dealing characters. Cloud has the version 5 Omni Slash, alright, for his big limit burst of choice, whereas Sleeping Lion Squall has Blasting Zone. So Blasting Zone, since we're right here, it's going to be a 30 hit skill which does chain that costs 34 limit burst crystals and is a 58 times multiplier. So it's a chaining limit burst, 58 times mod, very solid damage. This is a high multiplier for a limit burst. Whereas Advent Children Cloud's limit burst is going to be a 34 times multiplier, ignoring 50% of the enemy's defense. That's the equivalent of a 68 times multiplier. That's 10 higher than Sleeping Lion Squall's. It also is going to give you a 100% limit burst damage buff for a single turn to the caster, and this is going to be applied before the limit burst actually does its damage. So that's going to amplify that multiplier even higher than what Squall's does. Now there is a downside to this, and this is that the skill, or limit burst should I say, is a 5 hit limit burst. You cannot really chain this up. You really need to use this more as a chain finishing limit burst. So he's a little less self-sufficient in that department when it comes to actually using his limit burst. On top of that, it also does some extra things where it's going to unlock triple cast for Cloud for 2 turns and unlock some pretty important skills when it comes to successfully using this limit burst over and over and over. That's pretty much where the similarities in their kits kind of end, but they do have a couple more similarities. They have some other things that they can do to keep using their limit bursts, and they also have the ability to give themselves elemental imbues. Alright, so we have the ability for Advent Children Cloud here to add both light and earth element while imperiling those respective elements by 80% for 5 turns to the enemy in case of the imperil, and then 5 turns of the imbue to the character himself. Whereas Sleeping Lion Squall, instead of having earth and light, actually has the ability to imperil 2 different elements that he can also imbue, which is going to be fire and thunder. He has 5 turn 100% imperil as well as 5 turn imbue for the same element to himself. He also has the ability to imperil wind by 100%, but he cannot imbue wind into his own weapon. So this is pretty much where the similarities kind of end for the most part. They do both share a 250% attack buff as well, and they are those limit burst damage dealing characters, but when it comes to enabling the ability for you to just continuously use this limit burst is where they sort of differ a little bit. This is where Squall actually gets to use this level 1 skill at 5-star here, where it is a 20 times multiplier to one enemy. It is the Stardust Ray Chaining Frame family, and every time you use it, it gives you 12 limit burst gauge crystals to the caster. So if you triple cast this skill, which he does have passively triple cast, you don't need to unlock it or anything like that, he just always has it, you're going to be able to fill up that limit burst gauge by 36 crystals, which is going to be more than enough to fully fill his limit burst gauge in the case of the boy Sleeping Lion Squall. Cloud has a different sort of approach. This is going to come through one of his unlock skills he gets from actually using Omni Slash version 5. This is going to be one of these skills that is unlocked for 4 turns to the caster, and it is going to be this skill right here. It gives him a 100% resistance to attack break for 3 turns to the caster, but it also gives him 20 limit burst crystals as well, and this only costs 24 MP, and this is also a triple castable skill, and you are going to also unlock triple cast from his limit burst for 4 turns as well, which means you can go in there, use your limit burst, and then the next turn you can go right on ahead, double cast this skill here for the 40 limit burst crystals that you do need to use the limit burst. You'll have one skill left over to do what you choose to do. This can either be to keep your imperils and imbues up if you are using his own self-imbues and self-imperils for himself. Lots of himselfs out there. He also has some other cooldown skills you may want to be using on this turn as well, which is the ability to give himself his nice 250% attack buff, as well as this other cooldown skill that unlocks on turn 4 for Cloud, which is going to do 30 times multiplier worth of damage to an enemy, but it's also going to give him a 150% limit burst damage increase for 3 turns as well. So this is going to be even higher than the limit burst damage buff that his limit burst actually gives, but do keep in mind that these do not stack. So he's always going to have a minimum of 100% limit burst damage buff, but he can go all the way up to 150%. This is not going to stack. Once again, it's not going to give him a 250% limit burst damage buff. 150 is as high as it goes with the case of Advent Children Cloud. Now, that being said, these characters also differentiate themselves from each other, as Cloud is a true dual wield unit. He doesn't have the 6 times multiplier attack bonus, the true dual wield mastery. That is not a passive that he has in his kit, but you are still going to go true dual wield with him regardless. It's going to be his best build. It's going to allow him to get the most limit burst damage in his different builds, whether it's a low tier build, entry build, TMR build, no super TMR build, or even a fully super TMR decked out build, where Sleeping Lion Squall is a true double hand character. So this is going to also help him out when he's doing that damage on his off turns compared to Advent Children Cloud. Now keep in mind that this multiplier right here that he's using to fill his limit burst up, 20 times multiplier, isn't the highest in the game by any stretch of the imagination, but he's also doing damage with a skill on his off turns, unlike Cloud, where if you're using his unlock skill to just give himself 40 limit burst crystals, this skill doesn't do any damage. So he kind of does less damage than Squall does on his off turns, but he's going to be doing more damage assuming you are chain finishing his limit burst by a significant margin on his damage dealing turns with said limit burst. Outside of that, they don't have a lot of other similarities or major differences, so we're going to go into the builds now so you guys can get a solid grasp of the gear and what you're going to be getting out of the characters, and we're going to talk about some other things as well as team composition wise, other characters that you could be looking out for when you're trying to build a team around either Cloud or Squall. As far as builds, what we're going to be doing, we're going to be using 2 different builds per character, a no super TMR except for their own super TMR build, or a fully fleshed out build. This is going to be 2 for Squall and 2 for Cloud. We are using their own super TMR because this is a foresight video, and if you guys do want to go ahead and max these characters out, at least with 1 super TMR, you may be saving up some super TMR tickets, so we're going to be using their super TMR for this build. You don't have to have it, but you are going to want your trust abilities for these characters when it comes to especially Cloud activating his upgraded limit burst here. So here we have his upgraded limit burst selected. It does give us that 100% limit burst damage buff. You can either leave this field blank when you're using the builder because it's going to automatically apply it, but if you leave it blank, it's going to look like we have a little bit less limit burst damage on the stat sheet here. So we're just going to throw that in there, and it's not going to change our damage at all. We are going to be using their self-imbues and self-imperils with each of these characters. This is going to help out Squall a little bit here, but if you do have some sort of external imperil, 100%, 120% for Cloud, that's going to help him out. Squall's also going to have something to help him out as well. When we get into the Squall stuff, we'll be talking about the team composition of these 2 characters. Now we do have 150% limit burst damage here. We can also go ahead and look at the 150% limit burst damage, that one strong hitting turn that you get from his cooldown skill that unlocks on turn 4. This is going to give you a little bit more limit burst damage as well. But if we just stick with the 100 for right now with the Earth Imbue and the 80% Earth Imperil, and we also are building against a dragon for all of these builds. We're using killers here because you're always going to want to build for killers when maximizing any physical damage dealing unit, not just these 2. And dragon is the one of the enemy types that they share absolutely no love for. They both have 0% Dragon Killer, so it's a very neutral enemy to test against here. Some of the characters here have like, 150% Beast Killer, 150% Human Killer, so we're going to pick Dragon because they both natively have 0% Dragon Killer. Now, when you use this build here, Darksteel Destroyer, his own Super TMR, Final Fantasy VII Cloud, Advent Children, I think that's the first Sakuri, or whatever it's called, I don't even know. We're going to call it the Buster Stored Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, okay? Erdwin's Coronet, King Ring's Armor, Hermes Sandals, Storm Kickers, Astral Protection, and then the lovely dovely Dragon Killer plus Sildur's Protection with Odin equipped. We're going to be getting 494 million damage before chain finishing. So if you can chain finish this, you fit it into some supportive chain, which is something you're going to want to be doing with Advent Children Cloud. This is going to be giving you literally right under 2 billion damage with only one super TMR on this character. So that's a pretty fantastic thing for him. Now, what is the damage difference if you go for a maxed out version of Cloud? How much damage are you actually gaining? How much are you losing by not having the full super TMR suite? So let's go ahead and check this build out. So when we're looking for the damage change we get from the super TMR build, we'll see that we get 643 million. This is a larger number than the 494 million, so you're going to gain from nearly 500 million up to almost 650 million. So you're gonna gain like 140-ish million damage. It's a pretty decent change. It's a chunk of damage there for sure. It's nothing super insane. It's not like he's quintupling his damage using full super TMRs. He does a large amount of damage without a full super TMR build here. So that's actually pretty awesome for you guys saving for FF7 Advent Children Cloud. Now let's compare this to Squall. Squall here is going to be using his own Super TMR, which is, it looks like the Lionheart, but it gives him Blasting Zone, which is pretty funny. But we have the Lion's Heart here. We have Erdwin Coronet, King Ring's Armor, Cloud's Cloak. This is going to be Martial Gloves, anything that gives 50% true double hand. Storm Kickers, Astral Protection, Heart Overcoming Hatred, Sildur's Protection, and Dragon Killer Plus, as well as Odin being equipped. Now you can see he does not hit 300% Dragon Killer. He only hits 250%. You're also going to notice that his limit burst damage is a lot lower, 295 compared to the one Super TMR build of 295 to Squall's 195. So you're missing 100% limit burst damage here. That's because Squall actually doesn't have any limit burst damage increasing buffs. So you can see that his limit burst here is doing 369 million compared to Cloud's 494 million. Now, this is because of the ease of use of Squall here. Remember, you don't have to have any sort of supportive chains for Sleeping Lion Squall. His limit burst is a 30-hit skill and is very self-sufficient. This is going to be, even though it doesn't chain with the likes of Esther and King Rain, it's going to be very similar to their playstyles where they don't really need some other supports or tanks or anything to build the chain for them. If that's the kind of playstyle that you want to go for, then Sleeping Lion Squall is going to be your guy, bottom line. So he's going to have a little bit less damage in that way. He also is being helped out a little bit by him having a 100% Imperil compared to Cloud's 80%. Now let's compare this to the Super TMR build in Global, which actually involves the big black Sparky here, which is actually phenomenal for him due to having the higher variance as well as the attack of 40% as the rare ability. We also have Erdwin's Coronet, King Rain's Armor, double upgrade package, Astral Protection, Lionheart, Heart Overcoming Hatred, and Dragon Killer Plus. We're still building for Dragon. We still have the 100% Imperil to Thunder with the Thunder Imbue here. So 498 million here compared to the fully Super TMR build of Cloud's 643. So it's a pretty substantial difference here. But we also have one thing that we can use to help out Squall compared to Cloud. Cloud has those giant limit burst damage buffs. So if you have some characters who do big limit burst damage buffs in your party composition, we just had Luna Freya come out not too long ago that has 50% there. There's also the likes of characters like Rivera running around in Global. We may get more characters who also do limit burst damage buffs for these characters. If you actually go ahead and give him 50% Squall in each of these things, he's not going to be out damaging Cloud in any sense, but he's going to be a little bit less behind because that's the big thing, right? Cloud has 325% limit burst damage compared to, without the buff, Squall's 240. So that's a pretty substantial difference, 325 to 240. If you give him that little bit more extra limit burst damage here, that's going to be a big catch-up mechanic. They're still both doing insane damage with their limit bursts. Cloud's more of a chain finisher, then you have to work for it. Squall's has the natural limit burst chaining with himself, and do keep in mind, Squall's actually going to be doing damage outside of his limit burst turns because the skills that he's using to fill his limit burst back up actually are chaining skills and they do damage. Whereas if you're using this with Cloud, Cloud's gonna be taking a couple of turns off every other turn, basically to use his unlock skill to get his limit burst back. Now there is some other things that you can do with Cloud. Now remember, if you're looking for a high ceiling character, you can actually do a lot of cool stuff with Cloud, with Entrust, with limit burst generation for your party. And remember, his cooldown skill that FF7 Advent Children Cloud gets is actually a 3-turn buff to his limit burst damage, 150% limit burst damage for 3 turns to the caster. This makes him much more of a bursty character. So on these turns where you have 150% limit burst damage, you're going to be able to get a limit burst off the following turn with 150% limit burst. So that's going to be 718 million with his fully super TMR build and the builder before chain finishing, and his 1 super TMR build at 556 million damage in these circumstances. You can also go a step further if you want to and increase your imperils up to 100% from an external imperiler, and this is going to allow you to increase the damage you do. This is what I meant by having a higher ceiling for damage, at least as far as burst damage goes for Advent Children Cloud. 798 million damage with the limit burst here before chain finishing versus Squall's 571. That's a lot of damage to be having increased here, with both of them having basically all of the love that you can get. The limit burst damage buff for Squall, and then the external imperils, as well as the external big limit burst damage increase. Now remember, this limit burst damage increase 150 isn't external, but you can get a back-to-back limit burst with some Entrust in your team. Maybe you have Galoof on your team. Maybe you're using, I think Alexander Charlotte has Entrust as well. Maybe you're running Alexander Charlotte and Myra, and they both have their limit burst ready, and you use the limit burst with both your Advent Children Clouds, chain them up, and then double Entrust them, and chain them up again the following turn. You get 2 turns of this 150% limit burst damage buff. How likely is the battle going to allow you to do that? It's going to be pretty tricky to do, but it is something that you still can do there, and that's something to keep in mind when looking at both of these characters and which one you want to pull for. Ultimately, it's going to be dependent on which of the two you like more and how much you're willing to work for a character. If you want a character to be easier to use, then Squall is going to be the one that you want in your party. He chains his limit burst himself. You don't have to worry about him having to chain finish his limit burst if that's something that you're looking for. Squall's your guy. Squall also does do other stuff on his external turns by doing damage with his level 1 skill 20 times multiplier. You just cast this 3 times, or even cast this skill 2 times, get 24 limit burst crystals, and then you go ahead and cast one of his self-imbues and self-imperils. So you start off a turn with the lightning damage skill, and then use this skill 2 times. It's going to give you 24 limit burst crystals out of the 34 that he needs, with some high tide gear, some high tide buffs, some self limit burst gauge crystals per turn, equipment that you could have on there like Martial Glove or whatever have you, depending on what build you're doing. You'll also more than likely be able to fill that limit burst gauge up on those turns as well, using only 2 of this skill that increase your limit burst by 12 per turn. Whereas Cloud really doesn't do anything like we've said on those external turns. He does have this other stuff that he can do. He does have these Stardust Ray skills that cost limit burst crystals that increase the damage multipliers of his non-cooldown, non-limit burst crystal costing skills. He's got an Octaslash AoE and a Stardust Ray single target, but these are going to be draining your limit burst crystals with Cloud. You're going to be wanting to pretty much avoid these skills on Cloud and going for them big chunks of damage with his limit burst. There are going to be certain situations where you don't want to do that much damage on a character. Maybe you want to whittle a boss down a certain amount and then finish them off with his limit burst, and that might be a situation that you're going to be using those, but you're going to be using those far and few between. You're really only going to be using his limit burst, which remember, both these characters do start off with that limit burst unlocked, so Cloud can fire this off on turn 1 even with no support, and then after that you can start using the triple cast that's unlocked. Use this skill 2 times, get 40 limit burst crystals, and then go ahead and self-imbue and self-imperil there for your character. So hopefully this helped you guys out determining which of the two you guys are really into when comparing both Advent Children Cloud and Sleeping Lion Squall. They both do a lot of damage here. Squall, you can definitely see how he's a little bit less damage with his limit burst compared to Cloud in the long run. But like I said, guys, he's more self-sufficient than Cloud. If that's something that's right up your alley, you want to have access to the more self-sufficient character, the one that you don't have to build a chain for to chain finish on, then Squall is going to be one that you want to go for there. Especially if someone that does external limit burst damage increases, that's going to help Squall out a ton. It's really the only kind of thing that he really needs in his kit there. And remember, for trust abilities, Cloud's down here. You definitely need to have it on, whether you have his TMR on or his super TMR on, because it upgrades his limit burst. Or it also gives him a little bit of limit burst damage and some significant attack, HP, defense, and spirit. Whereas Sleeping Lion Squalls here, if you put this on, you can, if you so choose to. It's just going to give him a chance to ignore fatal damage above 100% HP and attack, defense, spirit by 30% and 20% HP there. Squall does, due to all of these passives. If you take a quick look right here, Squall's running around 8,000-ish HP on the full Super TMR build. The other ones, though, the non-Super TMR build, he's running around 11,000 HP. Cloud gets all the way up between 14,000 and 15,000 HP, though, so nothing super crazy. You can go ahead and change your gear based around that as well. Cloud's gonna have a little bit extra girth to him with that HP in those different true dual-wield weapons with the Outer World buffs on it. So hopefully this helped you guys out. If you want to see more stuff like this, go ahead, let me know down in the comment section below which one of the two that you're going for. Is it going to be Cloud? Is it going to be Squall? Are you going to go for both? Are you that big of a fan? Or are you going to go for neither? With that being said, guys, hopefully you like this sort of future content of comparing two different characters. And if you do, let me know with the like, with the comments. That's the only way that I know that you like this kind of content. If I don't see the stuff, you guys tell me that you like it, I don't know that you like it. It's as simple as that. But thank you guys for the support. You guys are awesome out there, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, guys.